Today's number 4 most urgent vulnerability on the Daily Ranked CVE Brief is CVE 2026-63030 in WordPress. And yes, number 4 still means move fast. This one is critical. It is on CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, and it involves a path from a REST API root confusion issue to SQL injection and potentially remote code execution when combined with another WordPress flaw, CVE 2026-63030. Our job here is not to dramatize it, and definitely not to walk through exploitation. It is to answer the defender's question: if you run WordPress, where does this sit in the patch queue? Given the CVSS 9.8 score, the KEV listing, and the very high EPSS percentile, the answer is simple. This is one of the items you validate and remediate before routine maintenance. The affected product is WordPress. The official NVD description says WordPress 6.9x before 6.9.5 and 7.0.x before 7.0.2 are affected by a REST API batch endpoint route confusion issue. The assigned weakness is CVE-2026, which is an interpretation conflict. In plain English, that means different parts of the system can disagree about what a request means, where it should be routed, or how it should be handled. That kind of mismatch is dangerous, because security checks often depend on consistent interpretation. Here, the description says the route confusion issue, combined with the author_not in WP query SQL injection issue, tracked as CVE 2026-63030, could allow SQL injection and achieve remote code execution. So this is not just a cosmetic routing bug. It is a core request handling problem with a potentially severe downstream impact. Verdict: this is a critical, remotely reachable vulnerability that defenders should treat as urgent. The full CVSS vector is 9.8 critical, but the two metrics that matter most for prioritization are reachability and friction. The vector says network attack vector, low complexity, no privileges required, and no user interaction required. Put simply, as scored, an attacker does not need a local foothold, does not need a valid WordPress account, and does not need to trick an administrator into clicking something. That is the profile that moves a vulnerability to the front of the queue. The impact ratings are also high across confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In practical terms, a successful outcome could threaten data, site content, and service continuity. The reason this ranks so high today is the real-world signal. CVE 2026-63030 is listed in CISA's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. That does not tell us every target, attacker, or campaign, and we are not going to invent those details. But it does tell defenders something important. This is not just a lab finding or a theoretical edge case. CISA KEN status means exploitation has been observed, and organizations should treat remediation as time-sensitive. The EPSS percentile is also 0.98427, which places it very high relative to other vulnerabilities for predicted exploitation likelihood. When KEV, high EPSS, and a 9.8 CVSS score align, the conclusion is clear. Do not leave this for the next normal patch cycle if WordPress is exposed in your environment. Conceptually, the attack path starts at the WordPress REST API surface, specifically the batch endpoint mentioned in the NVD description. REST APIs are designed to accept structured requests over the network. So when the CVSS vector says network reachable and no authentication required, defenders should assume exposed WordPress instances are the concern until proven otherwise. The route confusion part matters because request routing is where the application decides what code path receives a request. If one layer believes a request belongs on one route, while another layer interprets it differently, security assumptions can break down. The NVD description says this becomes especially dangerous when combined with the WP query SQL injection flaw, CVE-2026-60137. We are keeping this defensive. The key takeaway is that the risk is in a reachable API path, plus a query building injection issue, with remote code execution listed as the possible result. To check exposure, start with inventory. Identify every WordPress installation you operate, including production sites, staging sites, old marketing microsites, internal portals, and abandoned test systems that still resolve publicly. Then confirm the WordPress core version on each one. The NVD description names WordPress 6.9.x before 6.9.5 and 7.0.x before 7.0.2. But for operational decisions, use the official WordPress advisory and release information as the source of truth for exact affected and fixed versions. Next, determine whether the site is reachable from the internet, and whether REST API traffic is allowed through your reverse proxy, CDN, WAF, or load balancer. If you cannot quickly prove a site is patched, assume it needs review. Also remember that WordPress estates often sprawl. One forgotten instance can carry the same organizational risk as the main site. The primary fix is to update affected WordPress core installations to a version identified as fixed by the official WordPress guidance. Prioritize internet-facing sites first, then any internal sites reachable by broad user populations or partner networks. Before patching, take a clean backup so you can recover if the update exposes compatibility issues. After patching, verify the reported WordPress version from the administrative interface or your asset tooling, and confirm the site is functioning normally. If you cannot patch immediately, reduce exposure while you work. Use your existing WAF, reverse proxy, or access controls to limit unnecessary access to the affected REST API surface where that is safe for your business. Do not treat mitigation as a substitute for patching. Because this is KEV listed, the end state should be updated WordPress, documented verification, and a short follow-up review for suspicious activity. For detection, focus on behavior around the WordPress REST API and the database layer. In web server, CDN, WAF, and application logs, look for unusual volume or patterns directed at REST API batch endpoint paths, especially from sources that do not normally interact with your site that way. Normal REST API traffic for a stable site usually has recognizable volume, timing, and source patterns tied to your own front-end, integrations, or administrative workflows. Sudden bursts, repeated malformed requests, or high error rates deserve attention. Because the described chain involves SQL injection, watch for database errors, query failures, or application errors that appear alongside unusual API requests. And because remote code execution is the potential outcome, review for unexpected file changes, new or modified executable content, unusual outbound connections from the web server, or processes that do not match your baseline. Quick recap. CVE 2026-63030 is today's number 4 most urgent CVE on our ranked list. It affects WordPress, carries a 9.8 critical CVSS score, is listed by CISA as known exploited, and the official description connects a REST API batch endpoint route confusion issue with SQL injection and possible remote code execution when chained with CVE 2026-60137. If you run WordPress, inventory first, verify versions against the official WordPress guidance, patch affected systems, and monitor for suspicious REST API, database, and host level activity. This is the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, what to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal from CISA Kev, First EPSS, and CVSS every day. Subscribe for tomorrow's ranked breakdown and check the description for the full ranked report.